Hi there out there, everybody. This is CSR6 Actual. We bought a little bandwidth tonight. It's not going to be too much of a problem. We might be able to get an hour and a half out of this before the tracers start coming online. But frankly, we're not taking a lot of their big space, so I'm not too worried about them getting on top of us for this particular little broadcast, because I don't think anybody's going to really be watching. Probably weren't expecting the hoodie, were you? That's good. You know, if I had a son, he'd look like me. We have all kinds of interesting questions tonight from wrenches and engineers all across this country and this planet. So we're not going to waste any time dicking around. We're going to get right to these questions. Some of these are extremely profound. Some of them are just general information knowledge. We have a limited amount of time, so let's get going. I'm not going to use any names tonight, obviously, but the questions concerning this common sense resistance have been exceptional. Virtually every one of them was exceptional, and I just decided to take these in no particular order. So the first question we get, again, no names on these mechanics, not even code names. The first question is, if you could pinpoint only one thing we could have done that would have prevented Red 17 and all the rest of the horrors that followed after it, what would it have been? Well, the first thing I think I'd say is we could have been paying attention. That wouldn't have hurt. We could have paid attention. We could have realized that what we're seeing, what we saw, Red 17 was no different than the fall of the Roman Empire, was no different than the sack of Rome. It was no different than the fall and burning of Athens or Sparta or any of these other great city-states. Sometimes it happens in slow motion, but usually it doesn't. So the first thing I'm saying we could have done to avoid all this is we could have paid some attention and understood that this stuff has happened before. And we could have recognized the symptoms of what it looks like when it's about to happen, and we could have done something about it, but we didn't. And to be honest with you, the person who wrote that question, in a way, we can't prevent it. It's not preventable. It's not preventable. This is the thing that I'm beginning to understand all these years later. You look at the fall of these great civilizations, and if they were preventable, they would be. It doesn't happen again and again and again the same way again and again and again if there was something that we could do about it. And the reason we can't do anything about it is, and you're going to be hearing a lot more from this with this particular philosophy and organization. The bottom line is the reason civilizations fall, the reason Red 17 happened, the reason we took the most prosperous country and most free country in the history of the world into the most debt-ridden country and the most oppressive, most subtle, oppressive state in the history of the world is because we flipped psychologies. We stopped being a case-selected species in psychologies, and we started becoming our selected species in psychology. That's what happens every single time. And I'll give you the basics here because it's something we all need to understand and something we all need to get in our bones. You have basically two different kinds of ways of filling up an ecosystem. Both of them are successful. If you're thinking about terms of individuals, then you are missing the point. Just got to I'll talk about our communication system in a minute. We just got a question about Red 17 being the 1917 revolution. No, it was the 2017 economic collapse is what I was talking about. Although I suppose you could say Red 17 would have applied just as well to that other one as well. It's the same thing, by the way. Same exact thing. So here's the deal in the short form. Stop thinking about individuals. Stop thinking about what you know about individual people, and stop looking for exceptions. It will really help you understand this a lot better if you can get to that place. And understand that there are basically two successful strategies for genes to be passed on. You don't have to particularly like Darwin, but Darwin doesn't care if he likes you or not. Darwin rules the world of biology and genetics, and we are a selected species. Every species is selected. Every organism is selected. Those that pass on their genes, and those that don't. So there are two ways to successfully pass on your genes, two different strategies. There are organisms that sometimes follow one strategy than another. There are some species that are exclusively one kind of strategy. Some species that are pretty much exclusively another kind of strategy. And what you'd expect from humans, actually, from the most versatile species in the history of the world, the most adaptable species in the history of the planet, is both. You get both in humans. I'll get into the details in a second. But by the way, you ever think about this, fellow mechanics out there? Do you ever think about this? Is there anything on Earth that human beings don't eat? Is there anything that they don't eat? I'm not aware of anything that we don't eat. We eat everything. We eat insects, fish, crabs, lobsters. We eat birds. We eat bees. We eat cattle. We eat mammals. We eat reptiles. We eat crustaceans, arthropods. We eat everything. We eat virtually every kind of vegetable on the face of the earth, and frankly, we take in a fair amount of minerals as well. So when you have a species as adaptable as humanity, it doesn't try the imagination to understand that humans also, like every other organism in the world, humans also are successful in passing on their genes, but they're successful to such a degree that they're capable of doing both of these two strategies. Sometimes we use one strategy, sometimes we use the other. This is fundamental stuff, so I put this question at the top. So if we don't understand this, we're not going to understand what happened. We're not going to understand how to fix it. We're not going to understand how to get out of it. We're not going to understand what qualities it's going to take. So this is my new religion as far as I'm concerned. So if you want to fill up an environment with an organism, there's a pretty simple equation that'll allow you to determine how to do that. And there are two variables in this equation. One of the variables is R, small r. R is the reproductive rate. So in other words, if you have organisms moving into an environment, then the individuals with the highest R, with the highest reproducing rate, the highest reproductive rate, those individuals will produce more offsprings, and all other things being equal, more offspring, all other things being equal, the organism with the higher R that reproduced the fastest will have an advantage genetically in terms of passing those genes of high reproductive rates down to another generation. Now, there's another variable at the other end of the equation. The other variable is K. It's capital K. K is the carrying capacity of the environment. In other words, how much food is there? How many resources are there? But basically food. How many resources are there in the environment? Because the limit of the resources will limit the total number of individuals. That's K. R is reproductive rate. K is the carrying capacity, the limitations of the environment. I am deeply indebted, by the way, I should say this from the beginning, I should say it every word I ever say, to a gentleman whose name I don't know. His name is Anonymous Conservative. This is entirely his stuff. I've got nothing to do with it. I simply read it, understood it, believe it. Now I'm telling you about it. It's Anonymous Conservative. It's RK. The biological, somebody's going to send me the title of the thing. We'll see if we can get you a scrambled copy of that downstream. But in any event, listen, here's the deal. So here's what happens. If resources are unlimited, right? If there is a giant field of grass, an endless meadow of grass, if there's more food that you can eat, then R is the selected strategy. R is the selected type of animal that you want to build. R means that if food is so abundant that you don't have to compete for food, then those individuals that produce the most offspring will pass more genes down into the future. They don't care about the quality of the offspring. They only care about the quantity of the offspring, because quality is not only not important, quality is actually, if you think about this, this is really important. Quality offspring are actually a waste of time, because if there are endless resources so that anybody just walks over someplace and starts eating something, like a rabbit in a field of grass, then the more effort you put into fitness, the more effort you put into raising fit or competitive offspring is time you could have been making new, lower quality offspring. So not only is relative fitness not selected in a time of a great deal of resources, of limitless resources, it's actually deselected. It's deselected. So R is everything if resources are unlimited. And if you are a rabbit in a field of grass, then sure enough, you get a very R-selected species like rabbits. Rabbits have all of the qualities of an R-selected species. What are these qualities? Well, one of them is conflict avoidance. If you're a rabbit, you don't want conflict. You don't have to fight other rabbits for food, since there's all the food you could possibly eat. So getting into conflicts just limits your chances of increases your chances of getting hurt. It means you could get into a fight with another rabbit. You could be killed. You could be slowed down from eating more or having more sex with other rabbits. So conflict is bad if you're an R, because conflict is taking you away from having sex and eating grass. That's basically the R strategy. It's quantity over quality. So R-type animals are conflict averse, and R-type psychologies are conflict averse. What other qualities do R-type psychologies and species have in common? Well, R-type species have a very high rate of promiscuity, and they also have a very low degree of investment in the offspring. In other words, they don't put a lot of effort or time into offspring. They simply don't. It doesn't make sense. In fact, it makes sense not to. If the resources are available, and there's resources for everybody, doesn't matter how fit your children are, just get them out there so they can start consuming and reproducing. You can go out and consume and reproduce some more. Doesn't matter whether they're fit or not. They're going to get all the food they want. And another quality about an R-type species and an R-type psychology is that they do not have any particularly clear understanding of the idea of in-group versus out-group. They don't understand. They literally don't understand. They don't have the... when you get into humans, you find out they actually don't have the actual brain space for it, of threats, external threats. Because, again, in an R-type environment, if you have a field full of rabbits and there's all the grass that could ever be eaten, more grass than could ever be eaten, does the rabbit care if new rabbits come into the field? Of course the rabbit doesn't care. Arguing about the presence of a new tribe of rabbits coming into your field is a waste of time when you should be out eating and having sex so you can make more rabbits. Doesn't matter to you if more rabbits come onto the field because resources are endless. That's R. It's an antique, by the way, which I've taken very good care of over the course of the last 25 or 30 years. Now, what if resources aren't unlimited? What if resources are fixed? What if there's no endless field of grass? What if, in fact, there are limits to how much food or resources there are? Well, if that's the case, then all of a sudden you start to develop into what Anonymous Conservative calls a K psychology. An entire species are K species. So if rabbits in an open field of grass are R, then wolves in a frozen winter in the mountains are good examples of Ks. What's the difference? Well, if you're a wolf out there in the frozen mountains, there is no limitless amount of food. In fact, matter of fact, there's a very limited amount of food. Very limited amount of food. There's just a few animals running around, and they're fast and they're quick, and they're doing their very best not to be eaten. Everything that worked for an R is suddenly a disadvantage for a K, and vice versa. So what are some of the qualities of a K species and some of the qualities of a K psychology? Well, Ks are very competitive. They have to be competitive. Competition means that they have elaborate mating rituals where the strongest, fastest, fiercest, or whatever quality works, whatever survival quality is most advantageous to them. Ks will have elaborate mating rituals where where competition is built into their behavior. They're constantly competing for the right to mate with the females. The strongest get the best mating opportunities, and down the road you go. The strongest get the first choice of the food, and down the hierarchy you go. And so, unlike our species or psychologies, which are conflict avoidant, K psychologies are conflict. They're conflictophiles. They like conflict. It's built into them. They're wired that way. What else do they have in common? Well, K species have to produce fit offsprings. So not only do they have to compete with each other in order that the fittest males can mate with the fittest females, then you have to understand that if you're going to have fit offspring genetically, you have to take care of them. And it's harder to teach a wolf how to hunt than it is to teach a rabbit how to eat grass. It takes longer. It takes more time, especially since wolves cooperate in packs. All of this behavior has to be learned, which means that you have to invest in the children. You have to invest in the offspring. This is a quality of K species. You don't make nearly as many of them, so the ones that you do make have to be fitter, and you have to take better care of them. You have to train them better. You have to train them up. You have to make them capable of doing what they're doing. You have to make them be able to succeed against other wolves. So that's a quality of K. Another quality of K is that K has an extremely well-developed sense of in-group and out-group. There's the pack, and then there's not the pack. And unlike rabbits, who if new rabbits walk into that field, the rabbit just doesn't care. It just continues to eat and have more sex with other rabbits. If you have a pack of wolves in a very limited resource environment up in the mountains, and another pack of wolves comes into that environment, Well, that one pack is just barely alive as it is. They are straining against their limits. And so if a new pack of wolves comes into that environment, the existing wolves and those wolves are going to fight it out until only one group is left. So K-type species and K-type philosophy has a deep in-group loyalty, which the R's don't have any of, and the K's also have a clear and a precise understanding of external threats and are prepared to deal with them. That's basically the fundamental difference between a K-type strategy, a K-type species, and a K-type psychology. Now, Anonymous Conservative wrote a book, and I think I'm trying to find it here. It's, I think somebody said it's a free download. It's The Evolutionary Psychology Behind Politics, I think. Anyway, somebody said it's on Kindle. It might even be free today. It's very, very good. Changed the way I look at things. Let's just extrapolate this out into humanity now. Now, he's clear, and I want to be clear. This is not, in humans, this is not hard wiring. No one's saying it's hard wiring, and no one's saying that individuals can't either change or so on. The best way to think about R and K, so that you don't go awry and fall into error, is to understand that when we talk about R and K, what we're really talking about is something that probably best can be described as a psychological attractor. It's something that you might be inclined towards. It's a behavior you might be inclined towards. Some people are inclined to them very, very strongly, other people less so. And virtually all species have some degree of K and R in balance, and sometimes they change a little bit, so it's not absolute. And if you start thinking about it as absolutes, you're going to get into trouble. But if you think about them as psychologically attractive and therefore becoming ideologies that humans would incorporate into cultures and incorporate into their psychologies, then it starts to make a lot of sense. So when you look at the difference between liberals and conservatives, what do you see? You find that liberals are very conflict avoidant and conservatives are very conflict prone. Liberals don't like conflict. Capitalism and the free market is conflict. If I have a problem with my dry cleaning and I don't like the way the dry cleaner's doing the job, I might be inclined to start my own dry cleaning company. And I would use expressions like, I'm going to clean that guy's clock, or I'm going to eat his lunch. I'm going to drink his milkshake. He's not doing a good job. He screwed up my dry cleaning. And it made me so angry that I started thinking he's probably screwed up other people's dry cleaning too. So I'm going to go into the dry cleaning business and I'm going to clean his clock. I'm going to take his business. I'm going to do a better job than him. That's capitalism. That's the free market. That's competition. That's K. That's the essence of K. I can do better than that. I'm going to do better than that. And I'm going to take his resources. I'm going to take his resources because I'm going to be fitter than he is in the dry cleaning business. Now, liberals, of course, are thinking that's exactly what you conservatives are. You're heartless predators. We'll get to the heartless part in a minute. R, on the other hand, liberals don't like competition. And if you think about what communism is, communism, socialism, is simply eliminating competition. It's eliminating individual fitness. It's eliminating the ability of one person to say, I'm doing better than the other person, I'm doing a better job. Under communism, doesn't matter if you do a better job. Fitness and competition are bred out of communism. That's why communism is an R philosophy. It's an R society. So in communism, you can get up earlier and work harder. It doesn't make any difference. Everybody gets the same. Fitness is taken out of the equation by the government. The government of a communist or socialist society legislates out individual competition in order to provide an R sense of security where the relative unfitness of the R is no longer a problem. So basically, if you think about communism or socialism versus capitalism, capitalism produces everything we see. Capitalism produces the cell phones. Capitalism produces the jet airliners. Capitalism produces the MRIs. Communism or socialism don't produce any of these things. The reason they produce those things is because highly fit, highly competent individuals are in a state of constant competition trying to better themselves and their products and their societies. This is extremely stressful to R-type humans who know that they can't compete, who know that they're not fit for this kind of thing. They know they're not fit for business. And so these people would rather have a world where none of this competition exists because that benefits their chances of passing on their genes. If you are unable to compete, then it is going to be to your advantage to live in a society that has no competition in it, right? If, on the other hand, you think you can compete and win, you want opportunities. You want freedom to compete. That's one difference between K-selected conservatives and R-selected psychology of liberals. What are some other equations that match these biological backgrounds? Well, child rearing. Again, generalities, right? Again, generalities. But generally speaking, conservatives are old-fashioned. They believe in morality, and the morality that they believe in is that a man and woman should get married for life and raise children and raise them in a two-parent family. Whatever resources they can gather goes into the children in order to make the children even fitter than they were and give them a better life than the parents had. This sense of lifelong commitment is important. It's a K-type strategy, because what the K-type gene wants is the gene wants the fittest male and the fittest female to get together, stay together forever, and produce the best possible competitive genes. And that's why conservatives tend to want to stay together in a family unit. They understand this subconsciously. Ours, on the other hand, who are reproducing in quantity rather than quality, promiscuity is what you want. You want a society that allows you to have as much sex as possible with as many partners as possible. And, of course, the first criticism I had of this when I was reading it is, well, it turns out that it's not the liberals that have the big families. The conservatives tend to have bigger families. And the only reason that's true, my friends, is because humanity has done one thing that has completely altered this RK balance, and that is they've invented the idea of birth control. If you think about it as sexual promiscuity rather than the number of offspring because of birth control, if you think about the number of sexual partners and sexual opportunities that liberals tend to have compared to conservatives in general, then you do find, in fact, that conservatives are K-selected, that they would rather pair bond for life and raise more fit children, while liberals tend to have more promiscuous sexual relationships, and that their children tend to be sexually active at a younger age, and in fact, they're in favor of this. Conservatives are against children becoming sexually active at a young age because the case selection criteria is the child should be old enough to be at peak fitness when it finally pair bonds, you see? So all this stuff actually does make a certain kind of sense. And then you really get down to the stuff that really brings down societies when you really get down to it. And you really want to find out why the gates get thrown open at midnight and the barbarians come over the walls. You get into the stuff that's really the hardest stuff for somebody like me who's pretty highly case-selected to get his mind around. But this is subtle, and this needs a little bit of explanation. We said that K-selected species have also got a very strong sense of the in-group versus the out-group. We're the pack, they're not the pack. And liberals will say, well, that's extremely brutal and extremely nonsensical, but there's a lot of interesting stuff going on here. According to the author of this book, and he's cited a lot of studies, if you look at ideologues from both sides, conservative ideologues and liberal ideologues, you find out that there's a part of the brain called the amygdala. It might be the amygdala for all I know. I'm going to go with amygdala because I'm not a scientist, but I play one on TV. This part of the brain, according to liberals, is the fear center, and they say that conservatives are driven by fear. That's a misstatement of what this particular section of the brain actually does. What the amygdala does is it is basically the threat recognition center of the brain, and it is considerably smaller, statistically smaller in liberals than it is in conservatives. What does that mean? Liberals will say it means that conservatives go around driven by fear of people they've never met, unreasonable, unrational fear of people they never met. Okay, I guess that's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is this. What the amygdala really does is, the example he used in the book is an excellent example. If you're walking down a pathway some night and you hear a rustle of grass and a snapping twig, and then a cougar pounces on your back, if you survive the experience, it's the amygdala that does the connection. The amygdala is the part of the brain that basically says snapping and rustling leaves, predator attack, related, so that the next time you hear snapping twigs and rustling grass, you don't have to wait for the big giant cat to be on your back. The next time you hear snapping twigs and rustling in the grass, you instantly turn towards that threat and you bare your teeth and you open your mouth, and you yell and you get ready to either fight or flee. Now, that particular example is so deep in our culture, that's true for just about everybody. But what's not true for just about everybody is a sense to determine what is an actual threat. And according to Anonymous Conservative in his book, which I think is extremely, extremely, extremely persuasive, He says that these people just generally don't have the same amygdala development, and so they are not as able to produce the connection between a historical action that led to negative consequences and then seeing that same historical action repeated again. They can't learn from it. As a matter of fact, if you go in and remove the amygdala from monkeys or rats, rats will walk up to cats and just start nuzzling them and promptly be eaten by the cats. And monkeys will walk up to another monkey and just have the living daylights beat out of it. And then they'll go back up to the same monkey again, and they'll go again and again. They can't learn. They don't have the ability to learn because the amygdala response is unpleasant. It's not a good feeling. It's a bad feeling. It's something wrong. Something bad's going to happen, and now I have to do something. I have to perform. So what does that mean in terms of why we're sitting here in the dark when we should be on our lunar bases or fly around in our jetpacks or whatever the heck else we're supposed to be doing here in 2040? Why are we sitting here in rubble after all of this? Well, here's why. It's going to come as a shock to you, but it's true. If you think about it, it's true. Even if you think about it, you know it's true. If you are an R-selected psychology, and you know that you can't compete, and that in a head-to-head competition with fit K warriors, people who are fit, who are competitive, intelligent, aggressive, talented, capable, whatever words you want to use. If you understand that you live in a society of those people and that those people are preferentially going to get the resources and the mating opportunities, then this is really hard to accept, but it's true. I believe it. Then if you are an R-selected individual, let's say you're an R-selected American, think this through, folks. You naturally identify with the enemy. You identify with the communist over, the Soviet Union over the United States. You identify with maybe Al-Qaeda, or you identify with the whole grievance situation of the Palestinians or of the Islamicists over your own culture. You also tend to sympathize with the criminal over the law enforcement officer. Why is that? That doesn't seem to make sense, does it? Why would the weak and the uncompetitive sympathize with the enemy? You would think that because they're not capable of defending themselves, you would think that they would have, that our selected liberals would have a tremendous reverence for the American soldier who's protecting them or the policeman who's protecting them, but that's not how it works. You find time and time again, as you start getting deep into liberal thought, it's the liberals have the sympathy with the criminal against the policeman and the sympathy with the other against us. Why? Well, if you think about this from a genetic point of view, then it makes sense, because if you are not able to compete as an American, I'm talking subtle psychological attractors now, then it is to your advantage personally as an R-selected non-competitive individual who's going to fail against fit warrior types. It's to your advantage to have the enemy's warriors take out our warriors. It's to your advantage to have the two warrior tribes go to war and cull each other out. It's actually better for you to have American soldiers die than it is for having them to win, because if they win and exterminate the enemies, then they come home heroes and everything's groovy. But as long as there's a foe that is culling the K-selected warriors of your own tribe, of your own group, then Al-Qaeda or the communists are taking away people that are competing for your resources here at home. And since they cannot perceive the greater threat externally, all they see is what they're dealing with right in front of their eyes. That's why they tend to identify with the other. Now, if you have a K-selected species like a wolf, you have a lot of aggressive tendencies, and these aggressive tendencies have to be held in check. So wolves have extremely complex patterns of behaviors, and they have rules. As a matter of fact, you could say that wolves have laws. They do have laws. One of the laws that wolves have, another K species have, is if you're caught in a mating dominance display or an actual mating fight, once the one loser has realized that he's lost, he'll show his throat or take some other submission pose, some submission posture. It's a hardwired position. Sometimes they'll bow their heads, show their necks or whatever. And the instant that happens, the winning wolf, the successful wolf, will stop fighting. They'll both stop fighting. The fight just is over. It's biologically over. It's not like they have to cool down. It just stops. And so what that means is, if you take this into human society, you have a group of K-selected people that have a much, much, much more deeply ingrained sense of rules, honors, procedures, traditions, All of these things are built into case-selected humans in order to make sure that, believe it or not, that the weak are protected. Those behaviors are there designed to protect the weak. That's what laws are for. That's what the entire idea of laws are for. It's what honor is all about. So laws and adherence to law is a case-selected trait. And if you think about what we're seeing today, certainly with this god-awful omnipresent omni, which is utterly lawless, if you look back what happened back in the early part of the 21st century, you began to see one side simply cheating and being perfectly okay with cheating. Voter fraud is cheating. Voter fraud is cheating. Manipulation of the polls is cheating. The idea that you would have a law that favors your candidate, and then when it favors the other candidate, the Republican, you change the law, and then when you have a candidate that you want to get back in, you change the law back again. That's repugnant to a K-type person. But for the R's, it's business as usual. Laws and rules are for chumps because it's all about themselves. It's all about their personal ability to produce large numbers of offspring. So there is no sense of rules. There's no sense of structure or honor or tradition. All of these things are rejected out of hand. And so what you have is you have a society that has some people playing by the rules and other people realizing that the rules are designed to inhibit the fit and that the best way for them to succeed is to simply circumvent the rules because they can't win by playing by the rules. They can't win by playing by the rules. They understand this in their DNA. So that's the basics. What it basically comes down to is this. I spent the first half of my life trying to understand why societies rose and fell. Why did cultures and civilizations rise and fall? Why is there centuries or millennia of dark ages and chaos? And then slowly, out of the rubble, over the course of centuries, comes more and more cooperation, more and more civilization, more and more resource attainment, more and more political power, more and more military security. Why is it that as society becomes more and more and more and more successful, you would think that when the society reaches the heights of its powers, when it's as powerful as it's ever going to be, you think that when it's no longer has anything to fear from other powers militarily, when it has all of these trade and political powers and authorities, when it's got everything going its way, you think that's when that society would just go into orbit and there'd be no stopping it. But that's not what happens. What happens is every single time a society gets to the height of its powers, it utterly collapses, and it collapses like that. Why? It doesn't make any sense. It can't just be something random. It can't be something, and it can't be something trivial, because the consequences are so horrific that it's got to be something fundamental. Fundamental. Okay? Now, here's what it means. When you have chaos, the people that survive are the Ks, because the competition survives in the state of limited resources. And as these Ks compete, and as these Ks develop honor codes, and as these Ks develop cooperative societies, and as these K invest in highly fit young, and as each generation gets better and better and better through this sense of competition and protection of young and the weak and all these other things that Ks do that rabbits don't do, by the way, then society becomes more and more advanced until finally there comes a point when all of the threats are defeated, when there is no longer a credible external threat, when they have so much prosperity, when they have so much material gains, when they have so much luxury and so much opportunity, then the strategy for passing on your genes is no longer fitness. It suddenly becomes R. It becomes reproductive rate. It becomes watching out for yourself. It becomes breaking the rules because there is a limitless amount of food. And in my opinion, Anonymous Conservative has this precisely correct. Civilizations fall because once the Ks succeed, the R psychology takes over. Not the R people, the R psychology takes over. And this leads to absolute chaos. The Rs die off in huge numbers. The Ks preferentially do better. And then you're back in the dark ages where it's every man for themselves, and the people who are out there competing and fighting the Ks will eventually build another society until there becomes another endless sea of grass. And then the wolf mentality goes away, the rabbit mentality takes over, and we just simply eat and procreate ourselves into oblivion, and the whole thing goes on again and again and again and again and again and again and again. Now, if you think about it, that's the bad news. What's the good news? There's not much good news. But the reason there's a common sense of resistance, the reason that we're here talking to each other right now is very simple. we are a K-selected species. K is in our bones. We never could have gotten here without K. The amount of periods in human history where R is the smart play, because you need to understand this, R is the smart play. In a world of limitless resources, for that individual acting in his own interest, R is the smart play. Breaking the rules is a smart play. Consuming everything without producing anything, it's smart. We're getting to the point where we've seen it happen again and again and again, right? When you're a chump for working, when it pays better to not work, then you're a chump if you work. So it's got its own benefits, this R strategy. But the good news is that primarily we're K. Virtually all of our history, we've been K. All of our morality is based on K. Most of our strengths and most of our appeal of things that we like are all K values. So R has to be enforced. People generally are K. That's why one of the mottos of the Common Sense Resistance is R/K, be the K. Okay? Be the K. What does be the K mean? What does it mean to be K? What does it mean to have a K-type psychology in a world of Rs? Well, here's something that I'm contributing to the mix on my own after this anonymous conservative laid out such a spectacular case, and I'm simply aping what he said. I'm just a dictaphone of what he wrote in this book, and it gets deeper and deeper and deeper, and more convincing. This is mine, though. If you think that we're actually R-type species, if you think that we're actually really are rabbit people or herd people, let me just give you a little example. And I'm just talking to those of you out there who are watching this transmission. Let's say that all of us woke up tomorrow in the bodies of an R animal, an R-type animal, a gazelle, let's say. Let's say that all of us watching this woke up tomorrow morning on the plains of the Serengeti in Africa as gazelles. We still had our full human intellect, and we still had the same human ability to communicate, but in every other way, we were gazelles. Now, what do gazelles do? Well, gazelles, because they're extremely R-type species, gazelles go out every morning and they feed on the abundant plain of grass, which is more grass than they could ever eat. Are they particularly close to their children? They take some care of their young when the young are very young, but as soon as they can walk and run on their own, they're gone. So they don't actually stick together in pairs so much. They just go out and graze on their own. And on some level, the R gazelle understands that there are lions in the woods, but the equation that the gazelle is doing on some level, obviously subconsciously since they don't have consciousness, but the basic R equation is simply this. First of all, there's thousands of gazelles. There's only a couple of lions. So the chance of that individual gazelle being eaten by a lion is pretty slim. And frankly, even if he's selected by the lion, the gazelle doesn't have to outrun the lion. The gazelle just has to outrun the next slowest gazelle. And as long as there's an old gazelle or a weak gazelle or a sick gazelle, you're going to live a long time. It's going to be a long, long time. Until one day you're the weakest or the sickest or the oldest gazelle, and then you're done. But gazelles go out there every day, and they stay on the plains, and predators approach, and predators take their toll, and the gazelles run away from the predators, and they're grateful that it wasn't them because it wasn't them today, and tomorrow's another day. Maybe it'll turn out fine. Matter of fact, chances are it's going to turn out fine. Not a whole lot of planning into the future when you're a gazelle. Don't have a lot to lose either. So, what would happen if all of us listening to this right now woke up in the body of gazelles tomorrow? What happens if you were to put a K psychology into an extremely R animal like a gazelle? I'll tell you what I would do if I woke up tomorrow as a gazelle. I would look around at the group of the 100 other humans that I knew, just random humans, random Americans who woke up as gazelles, and I'd say, all right, there's 15 of us here that are pretty strong males that have got decent-sized horns. We've got some young and we've got some women. We love our young and we love our women, and we're going to protect them. So this business about us just walking out over the plains and just standing out there is done. We're moving out there in convoys. We're going to move from place to place, and we're going to sit there in a ring. We're going to put the males, the big males on the outside in a ring. Inside that are going to be the females. Inside the females are going to be the young. And here's what's going to be different starting now. Okay, starting now, the second that a lion bolts out of the bushes to attack this convoy, the young and the women are going to run, and the 15 of us, big, strong male gazelles, are going to not run from the lion. We're going to run towards the lion, and we're going to gore that lion with our horns. We're going to surround him with 15 of us, and we're just going to stab the living daylights out of that son of a bitch until he's stone cold dead. Now, maybe Fred the gazelle over there say, hey, Bill, we can't do that. We don't have claws. We've just got these hooves. We can't bring down an animal like that. We're about as fast, but you can't grab one and bring one down, to which I would reply, okay, well, maybe 15 of us can trap one, and maybe one or two of us will die. But I'll tell you what we can do is we may chase off the adult lions, because they may be able to run as fast as we can, but their cubs can't run as fast as we can, so we'll go kill the cubs. We're going to go kill the lion cubs, because if we kill the lion cubs, pretty soon there won't be any lions. Right? And if the lion attacks the convoy of gazelles, then we're going to gang up on the lion. We're going to gore him with our horns. And then we're going to put a little group of us together, 10 of us, let's say, and while the rest of the herd is out there eating, 10 or 15 or 20 of us are going to go out and find out where those lions are, and we're going to sneak up on them, and we're going to gore the living daylights. We're going to kill them all. We're going to kill them all. There's 20 of us. There's 3 of them. They may get 1 or 2 of us, but we're going to just go kill them. You know why? Because if we kill the lions, we don't have to worry anymore. The threat's over. Not even just for us. We could very likely get killed doing this, but at least we know our kids are going to be okay. We know our wives and our girlfriends are going to be okay. We know the weak are going to be okay. We're going to eliminate the threat. That's what happens when you have a K psychology in an R-type species. And you could do it with rabbits, too. If you have a bunch of rabbits out on a field and we all woke up the next day and we were suddenly not rabbit people like we see all around us in Omni today, what if we were actually K-selected humans out there? And we woke up as rabbits, and we had our intellects and we had our language. What would we do? We'd do the exact same thing. No more just going out into the pasture. We're going out in convoys, the biggest, strongest male rabbits on the outside, the weakest and the smallest on the inside. And when a hawk gets hungry enough to land in the middle of this convoy, all of us are going to jump on that hawk, and we're going to tear it to pieces with our sharp, sharp, pointy little teeth. We're going to just rip its eyes out. We're going to bite into its wings. We're going to make it sure it can't fly anymore. That's what we're going to do. If you can't understand that difference, then you can't understand why we're here. You can't understand the entire essence of the common sense resistance. The common sense resistance is not unique. The common sense resistance didn't start in Red 17. The common sense resistance has been here as long as there's been humanity. Common sense resistance existed during the fall of Babylon. It existed during the fall of Rome. The common sense resistance has been here throughout the fall of every civilization in history. It'll always be here. There's a term for this. It's called the remnant. It is a group of people who are ready to stand up and fight for this stuff. So that's the basics. And if you don't understand that, you don't understand why we're here. That took a lot longer than I wanted it to, but at least we got it on the record. All right, let's get to some of these specific questions and we get on with this thing here. We got a question from a mechanic saying, I've heard rumors that DCGs, that would be de-chipped ghosts, are like the victims in the old kidney theft urban legend. Bandits drug you and steal your chip, then using a special digital merger, the bandits have multiple IDs on their own chips and get more rations. If this is true, how can the loyal masses protect themselves from being ghosted? Is there any way to apply for a new chip if yours gets stolen? Look, when you're born into the society, you obviously have your sun chip put right into you, right? The O chip goes in there, and all of your food is taken care of, your housing is taken care of, your medical care is taken care of, all of your so-called salary is deposited electronically to account. It's all done through Wi-Fi. You simply walk out with your groceries and it's deducted from your account. You don't have to put your arm under a scanner, as you well know. It just simply, as you walk by, it just deducts the amount of money from you. It monitors your mental state. It monitors your physical state. Not well known to people out there in the world, but it also has the ability to release endorphins at a specific time and so on. So while you're watching the president, if suddenly you find yourself feeling good, it's because this little chip is stimulating your nervous system and producing dopamine and serotonin. And when he's finished speaking, they cut it off and you suddenly feel a little bit sad. All of this biometrics is, needless to say, recorded, and it's transmitted during the same mechanisms that are used to transmit the very simple financial transactions. So, of course, they sold it as convenience, and they sold it as safety. You'll never be lost again. If you should have a heart attack and go down, we'll have medical people there for you immediately because we know you're in trouble and we know where you are. And when they say immediately, they mean within 2 or 3 hours in the case of a heart attack. So what happens to these chips and what happens to people who are de-chipped? If you become a DCG, become a de-chipped ghost, you are in big, big trouble. Nobody's really sure what they do with these people. It's certainly a felony, and it's certainly a major offense, and you don't hear too many people who've been de-chipped and then go back onto the grid again. You don't see a whole lot of those people. They trumpet a few of them every now and then, but I suspect half of those are made-up cases, and the other half are, I don't know what happened to those people. Your chip is obviously coded specifically to you. No one else can use it. They can't possibly walk it past a scanner. It has to be living, has to be connected to a living being. That's not really the issue. The bigger issue is what happens when you pull that chip out of your body. We'll get to that in a minute because we have some other questions. Here's a question for you. But no, you cannot use somebody else's chip. You can't duplicate the chip. You can't carry around a bag of chips, if you'll pardon the expression, and get 15 times the meager resources that you would have if you just had your own. Needless to say, they need to be inside a living individual, and the second that individual dies, it broadcasts the fact that the person's dead and continues to broadcast for the life of the chip, but usually that's another day or two until the person's cremated. So here's a question for you. How will we be able to tell friend from foe in our upcoming counterattack? And that's a pretty simple question, too. We're just going to assume everybody's a friend. I know that may not sound rational to you, and it may not sound very K, but it is, in fact, a long-term survival strategy for what we believe in and the kind of life that we want to lead. K is altruism. K is altruism, and believe it or not, seems counterintuitive in a way. But it is only through the interaction of individuals who have their own constraints on their own behavior because of their competitiveness that you get into things like laws and civilization and caring for the weak. K species will do that. They'll care for their offspring and for their mates and for so on. Ours just don't form those connections at all. So we're going to assume everybody's a friend because I don't want to be part of a movement that assumes everybody's a foe. As I said before, we're a K species. K appeals to people. The underdog appeals to people. Struggle appeals to people. Rebellion appeals to people. It's in our blood. And these are policies that we can sell people. Most people want to be left alone. Most people have to be sold on the slavery that they're in, which is why one of the many symbols we use in the common sense resistance is that of an eagle. You've undoubtedly seen the animation where the eagle's flying over the mountains and scooping salmon out of the river and feeding it to its young, and then suddenly the eagle spots something on the ground, swoops down, walks into a gigantic cage, pushes the lever, gets a food pellet, and then the eagle just continues to push the lever and get a food pellet and stays in the cage for the rest of its life. And here's the point, folks. The door of the cage is open. It's always open. It's the first time in human history that people have been enslaved without shackles. It's the first time in history that people have been sold slavery through advertisement and through persuasion. Because nobody's got a real gun to the head of anybody up there tonight right now. They're just doing it because it's convenient and it's easy, and it gets worse and worse and worse, but it never gets that much worse. And it all gets worse together. And all of these R-type psychologies like resentment and envy and complacency and docility are all just coming up, where they've always been, by the way. We've got a lot of R in there. Got a lot of keep your head down, don't say anything, go along to get along. Better red than dead, right? Better red than dead. Better that we're defeated and let the other side win than we get our existence snuffed out. That's why we're here. Here's the next question. What's our policy regarding prisoners? In the event that we capture a soldier, agent, fed when our enemies launched a botched raid against us, we'd like to know how we make our next move. Our policy regarding prisoners is we let them go. We let them go because we have a choice. We can't keep them. We don't have facilities. We don't have lines. We don't have a nation. We don't have camps. We don't have compounds. We don't have anything like that. Our entire society, our entire resistance movement is based on two things. It's based on concealment and it's based on speed. It's based on rapidly changing, highly camouflaged set of locations, which means that we can't keep prisoners. So we have a choice. We either kill them or we let them go. That's our choice. We have no other choice. We can't take them with us. We have no place to put them. We capture somebody, we either kill them or we let them go. I say we let them go. Not going to be part of an army that kills prisoners. It's not what we do. That's not what we do. Murdering individuals and taking people out and shooting them in the back of the head is not what K warriors do. K warriors play by the rules. K warriors have a sense of honor and integrity and civilization and decency. And if it means that we have to help if it means that by releasing prisoners, we are in fact aiding their effort against us, which is undoubtedly true, because not only are they going back into the battle pool, they're going back into the battle pool experienced. But it's either that or kill them, and that's where we are. So we're going to let them go. With that said, once it becomes time that they realize that instead of killing them as they've been told we would do, once they realize we are in fact actually going to let them go, we recruit about 70% of them. They just come back. You know, I saw it happen just, I guess about 2-3 years ago. It was a brief little firefight. And these guys are wearing their black. You know, our guys are dressed in their outfits. But the Omni guys are dressed in black, and they're all wearing body armor, and they've got the black masks and the black goggles and the black face. There's no way to identify them. There's no people under there. They come on like robots. And I remember a firefight probably 3 or 4 years ago, and one of those guys went down, and he wasn't too badly wounded, and he had an American flag on his shoulder. So we took his mask off. We started to dress the wound, disarm the guy, needless to say. And one of our guys said to him, "You got a lot of nerve wearing that American flag." And the guy, the soldier, the Omni soldier, said, "At least I'm going to avoid the colorful language. At least I'm not a blanking traitor like you blanking blank of blanks. You know, I'm fighting for this country. I'm fighting for America, unlike you rebel, treasonous, low-life scum that are trying to destroy freedom and destroy the Constitution." That's what that Omni soldier said to one of our CSR security wrenches. And I'll never forget this as long as I live. It was Buick 4 who said this. Buick 4 is an amazing guy. Buick 4 looked at this guy, and then he looked at his buddies, and he looked down, and he said, "This guy's on the right team. He's just wearing the wrong uniform." That's pretty much it, right? Most of those guys are on the right team. They're just wearing the wrong uniform. They've been told that we're a terrorist organization, but we don't commit acts of terror. We don't kill people. We don't blow things up. We produce messages, and we produce resistance to tyranny, but we don't kill people. We don't assassinate people. We don't blow things up. We don't target civilians. We don't target their soldiers. We do everything we can not to kill their people. If they're shooting at us, we'll shoot back. But we don't go after them in that way. We're all about changing people's minds. We are a revolution of the mind. So the answer to your question is our policy regarding prisoners is we let them go. We tell them what we're doing, and we tell them why we're doing it, and then we let them go, and then we see what they do. We get most of them, believe it or not. Of course you believe it. You know why? By the way, you know why? You know why we have such a conversion rate with our prisoners? Why so many of those prisoners actually don't even go back? Why they stay with us? It's because the only way that an R-type tyranny can survive, the only reason there is an Omni, which is the essence of R, the society is R, but the people who are the political brains behind Omni are R-type cheaters. In other words, they've used their ability to compete to get to the inner circle where they get all the resources and they get all the food and all the women and all the money. But none of the guys in the Omni political class have the guts to go out and come down here and try and take our weapons from us. But they do have the brains to convince K-type warriors to take their side. So really what we find when we're actually in running gunfights in the Common Sense Resistance is we find that we are K-type warriors fighting other K-type warriors who've been recruited by the R-types up there to support their tyranny. And when you explain to them and you show them the kind of honorable behavior that they know they wouldn't get from their own people, then, you turn a lot of them. How do CSR members eat without their daily government-supplied sustainable algae cakes? There's a word for that. It's called farming, and another word called hunting, and a third word which is called stealing. Needless to say, the Common Sense Resistance is a relatively small subset of whatever free people are left living in this country, because most of the people who are living free out in the woods, out in the middle of nowhere. They're off the grid, and it's no longer the resources of the giant state. The giant state's just barely hanging on as it is. So they're going to let them go, and sooner or later they'll track them down. They'll get to them one by one, and they do get to them one by one. But by and large, what's left of the government doesn't care what's going up in cabins up in Montana. They don't have the resources to go after those people. They're having a hard enough time controlling the cities as it is. So why aren't we up there with them? Well, the philosophy of the Common Sense Resistance is, this is our civilization, this is our technology, we built it, we made it, it's ours, and we want it back. We're not going to just walk away from it. We're not going to go back to subsistence level frontier existence. We developed this technology, we developed this civilization, we developed this medicine, we developed these vehicles. They're ours, they belong to us, they're the result of competition. And so a significant number of us have decided to go back in there and start fighting these people and get it back. So we get supplies from the outside, needless to say, get some supplies from the countryside, but most of what we do is petty theft. We find some food resources, we'll take them. And we try to bring in as much as we can from the outside because it's better quality, but we do what we can. And we grow and produce a fair amount of our own stuff too. It's be amazed what you could do right under the noses of people. When I say take stuff away from people, I don't mean take away from starving people. I don't mean holding up grocery stores, needless to say. So we're not idiots. We understand how the system works. We're a virus inside the system. So we have any number of accounts. We have any number of ways to... we said earlier that you can't just grab a bunch of different chips, but it is possible to program a chip so that it looks like a different person. And so we're basically very small in number, and we're able to go out and get 4 or 5 times, 6 times the resources per person that we would normally need. And we have people who basically are nothing but, look, they're supply agents, right? They're on our team. They're not de-chipped ghosts, but they're on our team, and they get us the resources from the state. And so there we go. And you may say, well, gee, that's stealing, to which I would reply, it's stealing from the people who stole from us in the first place. It's stealing people who stole our freedom. It's stealing from the people who stole our effort, stealing from the people who stole our labor, stealing from the people who stole our property. It's not stealing. It's credit recovery. We're in the property recovery business. We're repo men, is a good way to think about it. Here's a question. I don't know whether this is sarcastic or not. I'm going to assume that it's not, because of the way we communicate. We'll get to that in a minute. Why are you guys so anti-progress and anti-science? Look at where your progress in science has you now. 2/3 of Los Angeles blacked out on any given night. Stand up in the Hollywood Hills and look down over the city. You can see the grids. You see the electric grids where the power's turned on. You can see where the people with the connections are. You can see the neighborhoods where the more successful are. But you look down there, and it changes from night to night. But on any given night, there are giant squares that are just blacked out, mostly in the middle of town. And of course, they're not completely blacked out. You can see the bonfires, and you can see the buildings burning even today. Even today, you can see little campfires out in the backyard. You go down to downtown Los Angeles, obviously. You go down there at nighttime. You don't see this in the public pictures because when they do this, it's all done with special effects. The city at nighttime looks all lit up. But you go down to Los Angeles and use your own eyes on Los Angeles, and you see all of the pre-Red 17 skyscrapers. Of course, the Omni building is magnificent and gleaming glass structure and lit up like a, it's lit up like a staircase to heaven. It's lit up like a gleaming silver spike that points right up to heaven. The Omni building is spectacular. But if you go down there at nighttime using your own eyes, instead of what you see on TV, you find that, I don't know, half, maybe 2/3 of those skyscrapers are empty, black. And when I say empty, I don't mean empty. You can see the signs of flashlights up there. You can see little cooking fires on the broken out windows. You can see, sometimes you can even see little bits of laundry flapping out from the breeze. But you can tell most of those are deserted, and people are living in them. They're just living in them in the way that people have to live in things when there is no, when everybody's given everything, right? When everybody's given everything, when a small handful of people decide who gets what, instead of the people deciding themselves who gets what. So that's what the world looks like out there. And as far as your question about us being anti-progress and anti-science, we're certainly anti-progress because we don't like this progress. We remember when all the lights were on. As far as being anti-science is concerned, it is our K-selected competitive engineering skills that have taken science and produced technology. So if you're talking about science, you may be referring to the sea level rise that flooded Los Angeles but didn't. That kind of science. So we're not anti-science. We're actually, as a matter of fact, we're about the only scientists left. We have a special case about one of our individuals who came to us into the communications branch. And he started realizing things were wrong because he had a party one night and everybody came over and they were admiring his TV set. And he was so proud of the fact that the TV set was a Samsung and it was 25 years old. Everybody said, my God, that's an amazing, amazing, amazing television set. You're damn right it's amazing. It's 25 years old. It's an heirloom. It's an antique. That's why it's so good. That's why all the stuff out there that still works is 3 decades old. And the new stuff is just a progressively poorer copy of where things were in 2017. They can reverse engineer existing stuff, although it gets worse and worse and worse. Nothing new. We haven't seen anything new since then, so I don't know where that makes us anti-science or anti-progress, because when we were in charge of things, there was plenty of science, and progress was not a word applied to progressive. Progress was a word that meant we're going to be living on the moon or under the oceans, and we're going to have nuclear-powered cars. That's what progress meant to people like me. He says you can live in an apartment, public transit, OmniHealth, like I do, but you live in sewers. Why is that? Isn't that interesting? Because he's right, you know. He's right. Why would you do that? Why would you give up free health and free housing and free medical care to come live in the sewers? That's the question, isn't it? That's really the whole question right there. Why would you do it? Why would you become a DCG? Why would you de-chip yourself and become a ghost and a person who doesn't exist, who's arrested on sight? Why would you even have to understand that, you know, you can't even walk down the street most of the time, because if people catch your biometrics on a surveillance camera without a corresponding chip, you may just disappear. Why would you go through that? That's the question. That's the question. That's why people are so fascinated with us. They can't understand it. They assume that we're savages and barbarians, but when we start talking to them, they find out we're not. So why would we do it? Why? It doesn't make any sense. That's the beauty of the common sense resistance, is that fundamental inversion of what appears to be common sense. And what we're really doing, let's go back again. What we're really doing is we're saying to a society of human rabbits, why are we leaving the endless field of grass? We could say to the rabbits, the grass is not nearly as good as the grass used to be. In fact, it's mostly just weeds and scrub now, but the rabbits don't care. As they just care as that there's grass and they don't have to compete for it. So why would we do it? Why? Because life is better down here in the sewers, that's why. Because when we're down here in the sewers, we have to depend on each other. And when we're down here in the sewers and we have to worry about what we're going to eat, we don't get to sit and have conniption fits over whether or not somebody texted me back. We have bigger things to worry about. We have the kind of things to worry about that we were designed to worry about, which is namely, what am I going to have for dinner today? And we are down in the sewers because we like the company. You know, when you get right down to it, I really think that's it. I think we just like the company. I like them. We like the company. I'd rather be with these people. I'd rather die with these people in the sewers than live with the rest of those rabbits upstairs in the skyscrapers, because they're not fully alive up there, and we are. We are free. We're the masters of our own destiny. May get a shot tomorrow, but that's the price. That's the price. And if you don't have that in you, if you don't have that sense of, oh, I'm a gazelle today, am I? All right, well, me and 17 other gazelles are going to risk our lives to go and kill all the lions there are so that the rest of the gazelles can live in freedom and peace and security. If you don't have that in you, this isn't for you, and none of this makes any sense at all. On the other hand, if you do have it in you, it makes perfect sense, and I don't have to explain it to you, right? I don't have to explain that to you. And the great irony in all of this, the tragic irony, the bitter irony, the kind of thing that makes you want to tear your teeth out, frankly, is that it is only through the compassion and the love of the K-type competitors that the R-type society exists at all. And that when we try to conserve these things, we're not just trying to conserve our own opportunity to compete and succeed, although we are certainly doing that. I don't mean to for a second say that it's completely altruistic, but what we are saying is our competition and our sense of honor and lawfulness and decency as a result of these competitive instincts is the only thing that makes the R-type life possible in the first place. And the second we go away, everything goes to hell, and they all die. That's why they called it Red 17. That was no longer sustainable, needless to say, where the population now is what? 60% maybe of what it was in 2016. And it was, what, 40% before they got the chains back on things again? That's why we're such haters. That's why we're such haters, because we love it so much. We love the people so much. We love our friends so much. That's why we're such haters. Here's a question. Was Red 17 only a matter of time? The United States of America was the freest, most prosperous country in the world. Was it inevitable that it would grow into the biggest government in the world and the one that paved the way for Omni? It is inevitable. And it was only a matter of time. Kind of makes sense, doesn't it? If you have the freest, most competitive, most viscous, the most opportunities for upward motion and downward motion, the most opportunities for freedom, advancement, for doing your own thing, for producing things that weren't done before, you would make sense that that would inevitably turn into the biggest counterswing, right? The biggest counterswing of the pendulum. All of that technology produced so many wonders and so much abundance that once we flipped to an R society, the R's used that technology to enslave people. And all of the prosperity and all the food that we were able to provide at such a low cost made people believe on some level that there would always be food, and we had so much money that people believed that there would always be money, and people thought that you could print money in the same way that you could print wealth or print grass, but you can't. You can't print grass, you can't print wealth. You can only print the exchange for these resources, and that's money. And people understood the difference between wealth and money in 2017. Those fundamental difference between wealth and money became crystal clear. So yes, it was inevitable. Of course it was inevitable. And now we have a lot of work to do. Does the common sense resistance hoard the ancient knowledge of smoking and curing real bacon? There's a mechanic after our own heart here. That's all you need to know about the common sense resistance right there. Of course, we preserve the ancient knowledge of smoking and curing real bacon. You know what else we preserve? We preserve the ancient art of how to change a tire. We preserve the ancient art of how to set a bone and how to apply a tourniquet. We preserve the ancient art of how to do calculations in your head. We preserve the ancient art of making a slide rule. We preserve the ancient art of aviation and flying. We preserve the ancient art of everything. We preserve everything. We conserve everything of value. We conserve them like the monks did. Like the monks did. There's an island off the coast of Ireland. It's an extremely rocky, extremely small, and very harsh little island, and it's called Skellig Michael. It's about it's just a little distance off the western coast of Ireland. And Skellig Michael is a unique island in one sense. Just by sheer randomness of it, the topography of Skellig Michael is such that the very summit of Skellig Michael is in a little bit of a depression, which means that you could sail around the perimeter of Skellig Michael and never see the top of it. And so back during the Dark Ages, a number of Christian monks went out to Skellig Michael, and they built unheated stone houses that looked like beehives. I've never seen anything quite like them. And up there, unseen by anybody, they built a small little monastery. Why is it important that they were unseen by anybody? Well, it's important because the Vikings, like other barbarians and savages, were rampaging through Ireland and Great Britain and through the rest of Europe. And the Vikings would come ashore on the mainland, they'd find a monastery, they'd kill all the monks, they'd burn the books, they'd steal the gold, they'd rape the women, take some of them as slaves, take some of the children as slaves, go off in their boats, and that would do it. But Skellig Michael was unique because you could sail a Viking longboat all around Skellig Michael and not see any sign of any kind of inhabitants up there. There was no harbor. There was no easy way to get up there. It was a horrible, horrible, harsh, naked rock. And up there, they put into little stone containers all of the manuscripts and all of the books and all of the learning and all of the knowledge of the Greeks. They didn't even understand it. They didn't know what it meant anymore, but they knew it was important. And they preserved these things. They conserved them. against the forces of darkness and the forces of anarchy and the forces of terror and lawlessness and all those other things. And those things then became the foundation of the Renaissance and the foundation of the rebirth and the foundation of the Age of Enlightenment. If those things hadn't survived in Skellig Michael and in other places, in other monasteries, where disarmed and selfless and defenseless monks, many of them are type psychologists, understood the value of this, then we wouldn't be here. And that's what we do. We conserve all of these things. We conserve everything of value. And our definition of value is, does it work? Yes or no. If it doesn't work, then we generally reject it. Maybe it's not working for certain reasons. It might work under different circumstances, might work at different times. But as a general rule, if it's working, we keep it. Somebody else asked, does this include the making of liquid bread? Yes, it does include the making of liquid bread, such as ale and beer. And so there is, in fact, a point of living in the sewers, and that is that some wrenches have done a superb job of creating not only extraordinarily good libations, but not bad food either. There's a benefit to be had by struggle instead of the swill that they serve you up there. Omni beer is like sex in a canoe. And I'll let you look up that joke yourself. Anyway, moving on. How did we, the lowest crime rate socio-economic political group in the history of the world who just wanted to be left alone, become labeled as terrorists? Labeled as terrorists because we didn't control the megaphones. We didn't think it was important. We let them control the megaphones. We let them control all of the media, all of the television, all of the movies, all of the late-night talk show, comedy, everything. They controlled everything. They call us whatever they want to. They could call us whatever they want to, and they did. And there was no... We depended on the press, you see. That was our giant mistake. What we really learned, I think, in the years leading up to Red 17, the one thing I remember was simply that we depended on the press because we thought they'd do their job. And what we didn't realize was that it was in their genetic... This is why this is so profound to me. It was in the press's psychological interest. It was in their psychological and genetic interest to flip the culture to R because there are people. There are, small r, there are type people. And they're driven by R-type personalities that want to control other people and bend them to their will, but not take the personal risk. This is the thing, right? This is the thing. If you really want to understand the R personality and how it succeeds, how the R personality succeeds, let's just go back, way back in history. And let's take the example of Dianne Feinstein, let's say, who wants to ban guns, right, is psychologically opposed to individual gun ownership. She wants to ban guns. That's a very R thing to want to do, which I'll get to in a second. But does she, in fact, go to the houses of people and take the guns herself? Does she show the courage and the fitness and the ability to go and disarm the people with guns? Of course not. She sends other K-type individuals known as policemen to go and disarm the K-type people with their own guns. They coerce and they con and they manipulate our warrior types into doing their dirty work. If it weren't for the fact that they were able to do this, they would have no power over us whatsoever. But the reason that they succeeded is because they're so damn good at telling stories. They're so good at this. They're so superb at camouflaging what they do in the banners of what we believe and using our own rules and laws against us that they're able to convince Ks to go and do the dirty work that they as Rs will not do. Period. That's how it works. That's how it works. So we are the media. The Common Sense Resistance is a media insurgency. It is a message revolution. It's a message revolution. We only defend ourselves. We're not here to blow people up. We're not here to take buildings. We're not here to gain power. On the contrary, we're here to destroy power. In favor of what? In favor of we don't care. Think about it. That's why they can't understand us. What you guys want to take over? No. What do you mean no? You want to be they assume that CSR Actual wants to become the next leader of the country. I have no desire to do this at all. I want to see the leader of the country. I want to see the whole idea of a leader of the country destroyed. I want to see the whole idea of hierarchy and coercion destroyed. That's what I want. So that you can take over? No, on the contrary, so that I can go out and barbecue and have fun and watch TV. That's what I want. I have no desire to do this. I have no desire to be here now. I don't. I would rather be doing something else. But I don't have that option because while I'm ready to leave them alone, they're not ready to leave me alone. And this is what we found. So it's a revolution of ideas. And if it's going to be a revolution of ideas, let's spread the best ideas out there and let's get in their message. The reason we're succeeding where the Tea Party failed is that we no longer believe that we'll get a fair shake. We no longer believe that we're going to get a good interview on their television. What we believe is we're going to put our commercials on their television by force of technology. In other words, we're not going to go and have you moderate our debates. We're going to put our message out there on your carrier signal as we want it, and then people will have to look at it. And when I say they'll have to look at it, they won't have to look at it because we're coercing them. They'll have to look at it in the same way they have to look at an automobile accident or a train collision. They have to look at it. They've never heard it before. Of course they'll look at it. That's why we'll succeed, because we have no structure, and we have no hierarchy, we have no leadership. I refer to myself as CSR Actual. Maybe I am CSR Actual. Maybe there's another CSR Actual. Maybe there's thousands of CSR Actuals. Or maybe there's no CSR Actual at all. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Here's a question. This one's hard. We struggle with this every day. Why should we save them from themselves? Why not just let it burn and then be burned? Why should we force them to have rights they no longer know or care about? I got it. It took me a second. Why should we force them to have rights they no longer know or care about? Because they have those rights. Those rights are in them at birth. Those rights are inherent in them as human beings. It is part of natural law. The fact that they don't know that they have those rights, and the fact that they don't appreciate those rights, the fact that they don't defend those rights, in fact that they may in fact vote against or even take up arms against their natural rights, doesn't mean they don't have them. Right? And if they're raised in cages where the doors are open, it is very tempting to let them burn. It's very tempting to just say, to hell with you and everything you've done. You've put all of us in this cage now. But you have to understand something, and if you don't understand this, you don't belong here. It's not their fault. It's not their fault. We don't believe in the masses. We don't believe in the masses. You'll never hear that term come out of this organization. We don't believe in the masses. We believe in citizens, and the term citizen means individuals who have a group identity, but they are not the masses. They're not this undifferentiated sea of humanity, indistinguishable from one another. That's what these omni people refer to them all the time. It's good for the masses, good for the masses, good for the people, the masses, the people, the masses, the People's Republic, the masses of this bullshit. It's about the individuals, and the fact that those individuals were never educated or told the value of those rights or given any understanding whatsoever about what those rights cost is not their fault. I know whose fault it is, and I mean to fight those people. Because if they understand these things, they will change. And this is another thing about arcade that, that people don't seem to understand. When they start thinking, oh, you're just some ideologue who's wrapped up in this weird genetic theory about people being pre-programmed. Not at all. I don't even care if there's a genetic basis for it, because it's so explanatory that it doesn't even need to have that genetic basis. It's so explanatory, it's so predictive that it works on its own legs, frankly. But the fact of the matter is, it is an attractor. And when the towers fell 40 years ago, the society went K like that. Not all of them. Not all of them. You could always tell there's some people that are deep into this thing, but it's a standard deviation. It's an attractor. It's a spectrum. It's a gray scale. However, when those towers went down, a huge number of formerly our people suddenly realized, well, that got my amygdala attention today. Some kind of threat is actually out there. And we went very K for quite a while until our success, until the success of our K warriors made sure that we didn't get attacked again. And then we simply assumed that it was a bad dream, it never happened, or Some people say it never happened, or this or that or whatever the case may be, and we just slowly went back to sleep, and we went back eating the grass and messing with the other bunnies, and next thing you know, here we are. So the answer is not let them burn. The answer is tell them what they're missing and let them make a choice. You're not going to coerce them. You can't coerce somebody into freedom. But you can tell them what it is. You can show them how it works, and then they can make their own choice. And if they make the choice to stay in the cage that doesn't have a door closed, then it's a choice. It's not abandonment. It's not intentional. It's not people sitting in darkness where the people who rule them make sure they remain in darkness, because if they ever found a source of light, they'd never follow those people again. How do you deal with government spies? Well, two ways. First of all, when we find a spy, we find out as much as we can about what they know, and then, as I said, we release them. We have no choice. It's kill them or release them. We're not going to murder people, so we release them. But the way you really deal with government spies is you have to understand the nature and the structure of this organization. The organization is structured in such a way so that there's only so much damage that can be done. It's a beautiful thing about a non-hierarchical, non-command, non-authority, non-leader structure. Leaderless structures can't be decapitated. They can barely be damaged. So your question really comes down to, how do you deal with a government spy who infiltrates a cell or a series of connections? My answer to you would be, how do you deal with a server going down on the internet? It's bad. Some data is lost, but the internet doesn't care. It is virtually indistinguishable to the rest of the nodes on the internet that the node went out in the first place. It is true certain information was lost, but we don't centralize our information. And we don't have top-down projects that are working from a central command structure where if you infiltrate them, they're destroyed. We have a series of self-generating, self-regulating, self-assembling structures that come out of the soup. It's a soup of wrenches. Each wrench has 5 mechanics on it. You infiltrate a wrench, you got 5 people. Maybe you've got the 5, but you won't get more than 5, right? So now you've got 5 people. But what does that mean? The wrenches are molecules. The wrenches aren't the command structure, not getting inside the Pentagon. There is no Pentagon. There's no high command. You have basically taken a molecule out of this soup, or 5 molecules, or 100, or whatever. But the soup is there, and the soup of these individual wrenches self-assemble based on need, based on local circumstances, based on real-time phenomenon, based on what's needed on the spot. We don't get orders sent down from above. You will go over here and do this. This mission must take place. Doesn't happen. Intelligent, competitive, educated, highly fit people. When I say fit, I don't mean physically fit, although most of us are extremely physically fit. I'm talking about people who can do things. This is why the Common Sense Resistance's motto is just, we can fix it. We can do things. We can change a tire. We can do all of these things. We can do the simple things. We can do the complex things. We just let these bright, competitive, decent, loyal, honest, hardworking, helpful people alone and set up a system where they can contact others to help with a specific project at a specific time. And at that point, it comes together, and it comes together for the length of time of that goal, and then it goes apart again. It goes back into the soup. That's how we defend ourselves against spies. We can't stop the spies. We do have counterintelligence wrenches that help us identify these things. And we have, I can't talk about that, but we have defenses. But the ultimate defense is limiting the amount of damage they can do. That's our ultimate defense, right? It's like trying to taking a shotgun blast at smoke. Undoubtedly, the pellets will hit some of those smoke particles, but as a general rule, the smoke is still there after the shotgun blast has gone by. Let's see what else we got here. I like this question. What do you do with your chip after you remove it? Obviously, somebody who's thinking about joining the organization. Do you sell it on the black market, implant it in a wild animal, and then right after that somebody says, arm still sore after the procedure, what do you do to take your mind off the pain? Let's deal with the first one first. When you become a de-chipped ghost in the Common Sense Resistance and we remove your Omni chip from your left forearm. It resides, as a general rule, needless to say, there's some variation due to individuals, and sometimes people get hurt, but as a general rule, it's very small. It's about the size of a grain of rice. It's implanted between your radius and your ulna, about a third of the way down your left forearm. It's in about that deep. It's underneath the skin. It's underneath the level of muscle, but you can get to it. You don't have to cut a tremendous amount of muscle open. It's not that deep. Needless to say, it's reprogrammed all the time automatically, and it generates its own very minimal electrical field through body heat. This is a superb piece of technology, by the way. It's really remarkable, and it could do so many wonderful things, except it's inherently evil because there's nothing you can do about that. But nevertheless, I digress. So what does the procedure consist of? The procedure is very simple. The first thing that you will do is, if you become a member of the Common Sense Resistance, is you will be the consequences of this will be made clear. And we find that once people really fully understand the consequences, those who've decided to come this far pretty much understand it. But if they don't understand it, when they understand what really is going to happen to them, the consequences they face, no more groceries, no more food, no more housing, no more transportation, no more healthcare, no more nothing. What do we do about eating tomorrow? That's your problem, right? Common Sense Resistance? No, actually, it's your problem. We have people that are doing this now. We can show you. But it's your problem. You're going to have to worry about it every day for the rest of your life. Most of the people that go far enough to get to us have already made that calculation. But there's sometimes when you have a tradition or procedure or something, it's actually part of the culture. It's part of the morale, I would say. So expect to hear something that is the following pretty near verbatim. We will generally take you to a extremely low level, very low risk location. We have eyes out, and frankly, there's nothing here that would be there a week later. This is how we roll. But basically, we usually use a medic, usually use a combat medic, and as a general rule, we use a standard Army bayonet. And what we'll do is we'll ask you if you understand the full consequences of what you're doing, and you'll say yes. And then this gentleman will start to sterilize his extraordinarily sharp blade. At least you hope it's sharp if he's taken a liking to you. In a simple flame. And then pretty much at every point in this procedure, one way or another, we get this comment virtually all the time. You have anesthetics, right? And the set response you'll hear every time is, oh yeah, we have anesthetics. We just don't have them for you. We have them for the guys that are going to need them. We're not a drugstore here. We have anesthetics, which we keep for our soldiers. And for those of us who are severely injured and wounded, you're not getting anything. And so it tends to focus the mind. And so the procedure is actually pretty simple. And you'd be surprised, honestly, how much it hurts. I mean, I thought I was going to say the opposite. No, it hurts like the living daylights. It is just if you're from Omni World, you've never experienced this kind of pain. You've experienced psychic pain your whole life, but real physical pain, no. But the good news is it's over pretty quick, and we're not, we like to play a little bit, but we are not sadists here. And these guys who've done this have done this a bunch, and pretty much get that thing out of there in 6-7 seconds, something like that. Incision's about that big. Sometimes it's bigger if the guy doesn't know what he's doing, but it's about that big. So basically, there's a incision that not only cuts through the skin, actually goes down to the top level of the muscle. The blade goes in almost as deep as the chip is itself. And that chip is pretty uniformly in there, by the way. We don't do x-rays because we don't have x-rays, so if you have a standard deviation where your chip is deeper than other people, then unfortunately we're going to have to make a second incision. That's going to hurt an awful lot worse, and it's going to take 3 or 4 times as long. Them's the breaks, kid. So they make the incision, sterilized forceps are inserted into the incision, the chip comes out, and then we generally tape you back up. We don't generally use stitches. Butterfly tape, the incision's small enough. However, the thing that happens after that's really important. Because once that chip is out of you, it is handed to you. And it's handed to every one of you. And it's handed to you, and what's also handed to you is the bayonet that was used to take it out. And what just about everybody does is they find the concrete block or whatever they're sitting on. They're usually somewhere underground, and you give them the chip and you give them the bayonet, and they smash the chip with the handle of the bayonet. And oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes the guy who's doing the procedure will put a little mark, some kind of indication on how many particular people he's de-chipped with that particular bayonet. And you might find yourself in the situation of being the first guy. Sometimes if you're really lucky, you'll find 30, 40, 50 notches cut in some of these things. You smash it to atoms, that's what you do with it. And you have to do it with your good hand. You have to smash it with your right hand. You have to take it out of your left arm and smash it with your right hand. And you have to do it. It's a funny thing. Seeing this so many times, you don't realize it's done until you smash it. In other words, you think you'd made the commitment by the time you just come looking for us, because you come looking for us, you're in real trouble. You find us, you're in worse trouble. You get shot, on sight for doing this. You get shot on sight for showing up without one of these things. So everybody, you'd think they'd made up their mind, but it's actually not until it's smashed, until it's just dust, that they begin to realize, okay, now I'm on my own. And it scares the living daylights out of people. It just scares the living crap out of them. Which is good. The follow-up question is, it's somebody who's new to the crowd. Welcome aboard there, comrade. Arms still sore after the procedure. What do you do to take the mind off the pain? Well, most of us find out we stop bitching about it. That's usually the first thing we do. Most of us find that the less we talk about it, the less it hurts. And then as far as the rest of it goes, time will be your ally in this regard. It's shameful for me to be in this position without having come from the military, but there it is. Not for lack of trying on my part. But one of the things that I had reaction to after it was done to me was I felt like I think I always would have felt, because I'd always wanted the blood chit. I'd always wanted the blood chit, as those of you don't know, many decorations on military uniforms are pins, and the pin goes through the uniform, and then there's those little locking things that you put on the back of the pin so that, it doesn't come loose. And needless to say, you're supposed to do that while the thing is hanging on a hanger. But what you often find, especially among the tip of the spear, where the guys are really, really, really into the thing, you'll find if it's a badge of importance, like a combat infantryman rifle, something like that, or whatever, what they'll do is they'll put the badge here and the two pins that should go through the uniform with the uniform off, so that you can just gently press it through the uniform and put the locks on the other side. What they'll do is they'll just put it there and hit you as hard as they can and just drive it into you like that. It hurts like the devil, I've heard. I know having myself de-chipped hurt like the devil. Getting scraped like that was no fun at all. But I remember after it happened, since you're asking what you can do to ease the pain, I remember sitting there going, it's close enough. You have to pay a little pain, to get into this club. It's important. If you're not willing to get hurt, if you're not willing to go through pain intentionally, voluntarily, this probably isn't for you. This is shocking. We apparently have a student from up above. It's got to be a student because it's virtually unintelligible. Excuse me, it's a bit long. I sometimes acquire unregulated cheese, as do we down here. Yeah, I know all about the dangers I'm risking, but I like it. It's never in stock at the local exchanges. From a local woman who makes it herself, she told me last week that before Red 17, I'm turning this into English, by the way. Before Red 17, not only was cheese always in stock at markets, but that the typical big box supermarket would keep hundreds of different kinds of cheeses in stock at the same time. I'll pause for a moment to allow the full import of this person's astonishment to sink into those of you who remember a world when we did, in fact, have hundreds of different kinds of cheeses on the shelves at the same time instead of just the cheese that we get at the Omnimart. The same, I couldn't believe it, except my parent told me a similar tale about ice cream. Now, I do wish the local exchange could keep these cheese in stock like my cheese person, so I understand what you say about the free market being more productive. But While the dark times may have been productive enough to keep dairy cases around the nation stocked with a bewildering number of exotic things, I have to stop here because it's so interesting that this kid who's struggling with this refers to pre-Red 17 as the dark time because he's been told that's the dark time. He's been taught in college that everything prior to Omni and Red 17 was the dark time. But in that exact same sentence, he's talking about the dark time as being a place where there's hundreds of different kinds of cheeses and ice creams as well. This is the cognitive dissonance that's going to let us win. The People's Army had to be called out in Red 17 just to keep everyone fed with basic staples. My teacher said that this sort of misallocation of resources towards luxury goods for the 1% was common back then. It sure was. With vast fields planted and soil-depleting, inedible, genetically altered corn destined for animal feed and plastics while poor people couldn't afford blah, blah, blah. So what's good about all the productive... I'm trying to make sense out of this. Well, he's basically asking, what good is the free market if it misallocates resources? And at the same time, he begins his... This is an anonymous honor student, by the way. I know he's an honor student because even though there's no grammar and no spelling, it is, in fact, somewhat of a cogent idea. At least the sentences are sentences. But you can tell you're dealing with Omnicore education here, because what he's basically saying is, what is the advantage of your competitive system that misallocates resources in a world that generated 100 different kinds of cheese? We know he liked 100 different kinds of cheese. We know he'd like to have 100 different kinds of ice cream. And yet, he's so inculcated with this story that he's been told that he's questioning his own cognitive dissonance. Basically, what he's saying in this letter is, I've been taught my whole life about how horrible everything was before Red 17 and Omni came along, and it sure does sound horrible with all this misallocation of resources, but what was it like to have 100 different kinds of cheeses? And that's all you need to know about the world today, folks. That's what goes on up there. Come on down, kid. The water's freezing cold. You'll never take another hot shower again. You may not get 100 different kinds of cheeses, but you'll get real cheese. You'll get to taste real cheese before you die, and real ice cream too. And believe me, you've never had it before. Here's a question. What does the CSR use for currency? We use the U.S. dollar based on gold. Who makes the guns and ammunition? We have, needless to say, been stockpiling ammunition for 50 years. We've been stockpiling ammunition a long time before Red 17, a long time before the Common Sense Resistance. There's a fair amount of ammunition out there, and the honest truth is we don't go through a lot of ammunition. We don't do a lot of shooting in this army of ours. We do have some very sophisticated people that are working on something. They're working on retooling standard AR-15s, which fortunately there are large numbers of, to rechambering the rounds for this caseless ammo. Caseless ammunition doesn't require brass. It's basically explosive charge is basic. I don't really understand the procedure, but I know how it works. Basically, it's an explosive charge that's cooked up in vats, and it's like a solid piece of chalk, kind of. And once it's ignited, it simply just evaporates in that giant explosive push, and there is no shell to be ejected. We don't have to worry about shells. Brass is a problem for us. Bullets, not quite as much. And we're trying to rechamber as many of our weapons as we can for this caseless stuff. Caseless also requires this trouble with the the reliability of the ignition of the caseless ammo. And look, I can't really get into too many details about that. We got a lot of ammo stockpiled. We have limited ability to make some more. We're not anything like out of ammo. We're not likely to be. This is not an armed rebellion. This is a rebellion of ideas. Does the Common Sense Resistance have spies who infiltrate the government? I am not at liberty to either confirm or deny that that would be the case. How do wrenches communicate without their transmission being intercepted? Boy, this is somebody very new. There is no way to communicate without our transmissions being intercepted. This is the fundamental thing you have to understand about how we communicate in the Common Sense Resistance. We do not have secret communication. Everything we communicate is in the clear. Every single message that's ever been sent by the Common Sense Resistance has gone over public airways, accessible to everybody. Because if you have a pirate radio signal being operated by a resistance movement, then the government can use radio direction finders, can snoop for that frequency, can triangulate on your position, and off you go. We communicate with text messages. We send text messages to 400 or 500 people. It's virtually untraceable. It's virtually incapable of determining what the message is. The code is the key. And when we say coded message, we don't send codes in terms of something that looks like encryption. That's going to raise a red flag. Each individual cell has developed protocols so that a code might be, what time are you coming over, baby? That could mean something. Colors mean things. Animals mean things. Certain different basic operatives of communication are common words. We might just have, for example, which I am making up off the top of my head, we may have a certain numerical value be assigned to a certain brand of automobile. We may have a certain state of alert branded to a certain type of fast food. And when we issue a text like this that goes out to any number of different people and is received by any number of people, 500 people will get it, and 499 won't think anything of it. They'll just think it wasn't for them, but the person who it went to, who was supposed to get it, gets it, and that's how we communicate. And it's not just through cell phones, and it's not just through electronics, but everything we do is unmasked. The code is in the message. It's not in the transmission. We scramble the language and then transmit it in the clear. Which, if you ask me, is brilliant. It better be brilliant because I came up with it. Yeah, you can't compete with this kind of surveillance. You can't put a signal out there that doesn't belong to them. Any signal that's not theirs will be identified, triangulated upon, and destroyed, and the people sending the message along with it. So we don't use our own transmissions. We use their transmissions exclusively. We communicate exclusively through their transmission methods. We just say what we want to say in a way that they can't understand what it is. And all these things change constantly, too. It's another nice thing about a highly mutative, highly intelligent, extremely mobile, non-hierarchical system is the mutation rate. The signal mutation rate is very high. And so that means you are staying ahead of code breakers because, first of all, there is no code in the traditional sense. And secondly, the essence of the code is not encapsulated in one particular location. There's not a code central. There's not one person they could get or torture. There's not one computer that they could hack into to get our codes. Each code is determined on the basis of the transaction between the individual nodes, and there are some rules for how this works, but it's always unique to that particular unit that's come together. And when that operation or project is finished, the molecules of the wrenches go back into the soup. The code that was used goes back into the soup too. Bloody genius, really. You don't outcompete K-type warriors. Not when we get our act together, not when the stakes are high enough. There have been several takedowns of wrenches in the past 2 weeks. Do we have a traitor in our midst, or has the government penetrated our communications network? It's a good follow-up question, I guess. I would have to say yes to at least one and probably both. What do? We just construct the same way that the Constitution constructed a government that was not immune to abuses of power, but resilient to them, resilient to them, intolerant of them, and capable of repairing themselves afterwards. That's basically what we run into here. Of course, we're going to have traitors, and of course, we're going to have infiltration, and of course, we're going to have surveillance successes on the part of Omni and on all these other things. Our best defense is to be prepared for them, use misinformation, counterintelligence, and especially limit the the amount of information that can be revealed and the amount of damage that can be done. That's the essential defense of the common sense resistance, is limit the damage that any individual node being removed can cause. And that's built into the structure. Here's a message. This to CSR Actual, which may be me, maybe somebody else, maybe everybody, maybe nobody. This will be a resistance of deliverance, not destruction. Couldn't have put it better myself. What can we do to bring the people to us and away from Omni? We live by example, is what we can do. We show them that they're slaves in a cage with the door that's open, that they're slaves with manacles that are unchained. We show them an alternative, and we don't sugarcoat the alternative at all. We live by example, and we will pull the 10% of the population that we need to pull. We don't have to pull everybody. We don't want to pull everybody. We're not going to pull everybody. We have to maintain the remnant. It's just that simple. We don't have to flip the whole population. The population will flip itself, because as things get worse and worse and worse up there, uniformly though, that's the main thing you see, as long as it's a uniform sort of a slow degradation, the R mentality doesn't rebel against that. As a quick aside, because I missed it earlier, and I think it's one of the most fascinating points of this whole RK thing, it's a remarkable piece of psychology, I think. As a quick aside, you would wonder why R-type liberals would, again, if they're not willing to defend themselves with firearms against predators like criminals, why would they be so sympathetic to criminals and so generally opposed to law enforcement types or soldiers? Just viscerally. Well, here's a thought for you. Unlike those of us who are K psychology, who have a tremendous amount of value in our mates and our offspring and our pack members, what Anonymous Conservative points out is really interesting is that it actually, now this takes a little thinking. He said that it is actually in the genetic interest of the R trait to have predation, to have predators taking people out of the gene pool. It actually benefits the Rs so long as it is a uniform, non-specific predation. In other words, if it's a hawk that comes down and just randomly takes a rabbit, or if it's a mugger or a rapist or a murderer who randomly takes somebody out of the population, it actually, not only do the Rs tolerate that, it's actually, on a genetic level, it's good for the Rs. And the reason it's good for the Rs is because if it's a non-specific predation, if predators are taking Rs and Ks at random out of the society, that actually benefits the Rs because the Rs reproduce faster than the Ks. So if you lose a K and R, a K and R, a K and R, and a K and R, the Rs will actually reproduce and fill those K slots faster than vice versa. Predation, non-specific predation, actually benefits the Rs. That's why they identify with the predators, and they don't even know why. They don't even know why they do, but that's why they do. And what they don't want and what they cannot take psychologically, and according to this theory, what their trait cannot accept, is the ability to resist predation based on fitness. That's why liberals are more upset at conservatives who arm themselves in their own defense than they are at the people that do the murdering, even though the murderer may murder them and their family. Because as long as murderers are taking people out of the gene pool, this is the way the trait is developed. Right? I'm not saying people think of this consciously. This is the way the trait functions. As long as people are being randomly taken out of the gene pool by criminals, that favors the R because they can reproduce faster. You're pulling Ks, you're pulling Rs, good for the Rs. But what is intolerable to the R trait is if the Ks basically say, we're going to use our superior fitness and our willingness to get into competitive battle with these criminals, and we're going to arm ourselves. You don't have to arm yourself if you don't want to, but we're going to arm ourselves. See, that's intolerable to the R trait, because if that is allowed, then that means that the criminals only prey on the Rs, because nobody's going to mess with the Ks. That means that the Ks go on and are successful and the Rs go extinct, and that's why the Rs can't take it psychologically. Psychologically, they'd rather have murderers running free than having fit people willing to defend themselves, because they know they're not willing to defend themselves because it's a lot of stress and it's a lot of horror and it's a lot of courage and all these other things. And so as long as nobody's defending themselves, they can live with it. But if some people are defending themselves and they're not, that's intolerable. I think that's absolutely profound. I think, in fact, of all the things I've heard about RK, that was so previously inexplicable to me that actually is why I like this man and his theory. It makes sense. Maybe that's not the cause, but it makes sense to me. Okay. Here we go. So yes, it's a resistance of deliverance, not destruction. We don't kill prisoners and we don't blow up buildings. We don't shoot at people. We shoot back in self-defense, and we don't aim to kill unless it's in self-defense. It is a message, and we need to get the people who get the message. The people who get the message will get the message. They used to call them the remnant. Now they call them the common sense resistance. They've had thousands of names through history. They've always had thousands of names through history, and they always will. Our job is to save that percentage, and I think it's 10%. That's what the Bible says it is, and that seems about right to me. And who are they? I don't know. Do I have a list? Of course not. Does anybody have a list? No. Do they know who they are? Probably not. Probably not until the moment comes. You might go your whole life and not know it, and suddenly one day you do. You're called to save this thing. You're called to carry this flame at all costs, even the cost of your life and your comfort. So that's what we're here for. We're here to protect that flame. Which is beginning more and more to seem to me that the flame is the K-selected psychology, the K-selected trait which provides so much absolute good, law, civilization, science, medicine, this idea that you can create things and build things and save things and protect things and fight evil and fight disease and fight incompetence and stupidity and all these other things. I believe in these things. Is there a CSR anthem, and if so, what are the lyrics and the music? There is, in fact, a common sense resistance anthem. It's an ancient anthem, American anthem, I should say. It is as American as anything I've ever heard, and many millions of men and women have died to protect the philosophy that's embedded in this anthem. This is the anthem that represents everything I think that is worth saving and represents everything that we are and everything we believe in, and I'm going to play it for you now. It's not the national anthem. The national anthem of the United States of America is the Star-Spangled Banner. It always will be. But the anthem of the Common Sense Resistance I will play for you now. If you're standing, please be seated. And so when they write the history of America up until this point in time, they will look back at this and they'll say exactly that. We had fun, fun, fun. That's it. We had fun, fun, fun until Daddy took our T-Bird away. And you knew all along that your dad was getting wise to you now. You shouldn't have lied now. You shouldn't have lied. And now we're going to have fun, fun, fun now that Daddy took our T-Bird away. That's what it's about, man. You may sound trivial to you, it may sound silly and small, but it's not. That's it. It's fun, fun, fun in a T-Bird convertible going down the freeway with a pretty girl or a handsome guy, or at least your vision of one of them, and going where you want to go, when you want to go there, without anybody's permission, and having a blast doing it, and feeling like you're the king of the world. And that's what this movement is all about. That's it. A couple other questions. I'm not going to take them. That's a good ending. I did save one question for last. I'm going to answer that question last. And that is this. How do we fight people capable of monstrous acts without becoming monsters ourselves? Well, that's the question, isn't it? It's always the question. How do you fight monsters without becoming monsters yourselves? You know, I haven't really thought about this before, so this is kind of as I go along, but I think what you have to come to grips with is you have to understand that in order to fight monsters without becoming a monster yourself, you have to use the weapons of the monster without the motives of the monster. That's, for an off-the-top-of-the-head insight, that's actually really not too bad. You have to use the weapons of the monsters without the motives of the monsters. We're going to use all of their weapons. We're going to use every single messaging weapon. We're going to use psychology, social proof. We're going to use example. We're going to use all of it. We're going to use all of it. And we're going to use it as well as they used it against us. We're going to use the weapons of the monster, but we're not going to use it with the motives of the monster, because we're going to do it to free people, not to enslave them. That's pretty much the fundamental difference. We're going to do it to free people, not to enslave them. And we're not going to be brutal people. We're going to win converts through our decency and through our integrity and our honor. And if that costs us individual lives, that is a greater gain downstream. That is the definition of altruistic group behavior. If we have to lose people, we're not going to lose anybody carelessly, because we're not rabbits. We care about every single one of our people. Every single one of our people is precious, irreplaceable. But if we have to lose some people, then in order to maintain that sense of integrity and honor and decency, then that's what we'll do. Because that will win in the long term, and will be lied about, and will be lied about. That's okay. You can only lie about people long enough. Sooner or later, the truth will set you free.